Hello, this is Isa Tan welcoming you to another Asian Agribiz podcast. While Vietnam's livestock industry has seen significant specialization, its slaughtering sector is lagging. One possible solution is to prioritize worker training. Hatu, our Southeast Asia correspondent, discusses solutions with Michael Patching, CEO of Alta Food and Agriculture.
Hello, Michael. Thank you for sitting down with me in this podcast.
It's great after a couple of attempts to finally get to talk to you. So thanks for having me.
Before we start, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Dr. Michael Patching. I'm the CEO of Alta Food and Agriculture and Impetus Animal Welfare. I'm a veterinarian and a consultant and businessman now, I guess, who has spent the last 9 years involved in the development of the Vietnamese production sector and all throughout Asia and the Pacific and in Australia. I lived in Vietnam from 2015 to 19 and was working for Meat and Livestock Australia then. It was an industry body from Australia. I now live in Singapore, where I'm still pretty active involved in training and other sector development.
Oh, so you've been in Vietnam for quite a while now. Then you must have visited many slaughterhouses in the country, I guess. Could you share with us the most interesting discoveries you've had during those visits?
I guess I remember the first time I entered a Vietnamese cattle abattoir. It was in Hanoi. It would have been about 11 o'clock at night. I was woken up from my car ride. I remember turning down into an alleyway, into some narrow streets where everyone was obviously asleep. The doors opened into this backyard of what looked like a reasonably grand house, multiple storied, quite a large area. But instead of a tennis court or a pool, there was an abattoir in the backyard. The cattle were moved into a restraint box that clearly looked like it was built by the owner of the abattoir, and they were slaughtered and cut up on the wood pallets on the ground. Everything was on the ground. The meat then went into the boot of a car in some, I think they were plastic containers at the time, and off to the wholesale market and onto the wet markets after that.
Wow, what a scene. I mean, it's quite different in my imagination because I see pictures of industrial slaughterhouses with nice equipment and clean floors. So, what did you feel then? It must have been a shock to you. What did you learn from that trip?
Like everyone else I've taken to that abattoir since, we've all sort of had the same reaction that this is unhygienic and pretty terrible conditions. I guess the hygiene in meat processing, which is really suitable for the wet market production, is one of the main confronting sort of factors that you first see when you come into these abattoirs, and the meat's really just not suitable for chilled products. But there's also occupational health and safety risks, which are pretty high for the workers working late at night and in pretty dark, terrible conditions. There's some significant animal health and welfare risks that I've sort of learned since, mainly around disease and the slaughter of animals with diseases and the persistent use of the beta agonists like salbutamol for both cattle and pigs in Vietnam, which is a pretty big human health risk. I guess the other major thing that I learned from abattoirs is how fragmented the industry is. Still lots of backyard sort of abattoirs operating, especially in the north, but these abattoirs are working in villages all throughout Vietnam. Unless you're a large company, then they're kind of run like family businesses anyway, with kind of lower investment potential.
From what you've shared, there's quite a fragmentation in the slaughtering sector in Vietnam. And it seems that the manual abattoirs outnumber the industrial modern slaughterhouses. So I guess this is one of the reasons the industry is losing out to the imported meat in terms of quality and cost. Am I right?
If you're competing against imported products, beef or pork, then you need to have enough animals killed every day to be able to invest in infrastructure and increase cost of processing. For a large company that has offtake, it's relatively easy. So if you've got a supermarket or some other distribution channel, then it becomes easier. But especially with cattle, but also pigs, you need to be able to utilize the entire carcass. You need to sell all of the cuts. There are two main reasons imported products can be cheaper in Vietnam or are cheaper in Vietnam, especially for specific cuts, is a volume issue. So exporting countries like Australia or the US have large volumes going through abattoirs. So those large volumes can be, the cost of processing of each animal is quite low because there are just large volumes going through abattoirs in a very efficient manner, at very high speeds, especially compared to many Vietnamese abattoirs. And the other factor is around exports and the ability to sell different products into different countries and derive a premium for those different products is a really important factor. In general, Vietnam doesn't have a lot of access to those other markets, mainly because disease reasons and other market access reasons in the country, and is not seen as a high quality producer globally anyway. And therefore, without that opportunity, it means that balancing the carcass and getting high value for all of the different cuts and therefore a competitive price for the whole carcass becomes a challenge.
So, what about the workers in the slaughterhouse? What did you see during the visit? How are they working in such an environment?
On the plus side, I guess the other thing that I learnt and discovered in all my time working in Asia and in Vietnam is the skill level of the workers. And compared to Australian abattoirs, the knife skills are pretty incredible, to be honest. And the workers' work ethic and everything is really admirable. They really know their meat. And every time I've gone to do development work, it's really been quite challenging because the workers and those working around the meat really understand nuances of meat quality that I haven't even considered and aren't an impact or a factor in other production systems globally because of the way they're killed and processed and then sold and eaten. So that was quite confronting. And because we're here to talk about development and training, it becomes, I guess, really, really relevant because it requires a complete change in production systems to be able to compete with competed products. It's not just about necessarily improving small little scale operators.
Oh, it's interesting you said the workers are quite skillful and knowledgeable about what they're doing. I'm surprised because, as far as I know, there is no training program for that in Vietnam. So they must have learned it by experiences.
I guess the biggest challenge in Vietnam is that they don't have a well-developed vocational training program. And there's no formally agreed programs for abattoirs or meat processing. In places like Australia and many other developed countries, there are certification programs where workers need to pass certain practical training and competency examinations to work. These include occupational health and safety, animal welfare, food safety, or other workplace training courses that need to be done. This allows for minimum standards of worker competency and knowledge and allows businesses to hire workers based on the fact they have some level of qualification. Most workers in Vietnam still have a limited knowledge, especially formal knowledge or trained or certified knowledge around livestock and meat and processing. Doesn't mean they're not capable and competent or able to learn this knowledge. There's just no access to it. And it's not required by law or by most companies to be able to have. Again, and I guess I'll keep coming back to this because it's really relevant. Without formal requirement to do it, this is a cost for most companies to implement. And therefore getting workers that have these levels of qualifications is actually quite difficult. So the courses don't exist in a really structured formal way for the mass workers. They're not required anyway. So the companies and the training organizations that have these courses have difficulty in maintaining profitability and running courses because they don't have enough people paying to do the courses. And therefore, there's just not the workers available. And getting enough workers into abattoirs at all is quite difficult. And this is a problem globally. Getting workers in abattoirs is quite a problem globally. Mainly because abattoir work is quite difficult and quite hard, and it's not very well regarded globally.
Yes, you're right. It's quite challenging to find workers for the slaughterhouses. That is what I've been told too. But I guess the need to improve competitiveness would drive meat processors to invest further in training. Like recently, we saw some companies that have been invested in modern slaughterhouses like Masan, Sanha, and Guangtuan Group. These processors need well trained workers. And since the local training is not available, they are seeking it outside the country. Do you have more insights about these training programs that they are involved in?
I guess, as I've mentioned, Australia has many different types of training courses, and there are different training courses available in Vietnam. They generally fall within two sort of categories from a global support side. And individual companies, as you mentioned, Masana, have their own training that they do in-house, but external to that, the first type of training that is offered is to get workers trained up so that they can come to Australia. There is, as you mentioned, Sanha, which has a cooperation with Response Consulting, and Quang Thanh Group, or Mr. T Beef, has an arrangement with Elite Solutions outside Ho Chi Minh City. Both of these programs are basically running as a way to train workers to enter into Australia. The abattoir workers then go into Australian abattoirs. There's obvious benefit to Vietnam companies themselves that they're working in while they're working in them, and improves the quality of processing within those facilities, and does create some spillover training for workers generally, and capability and knowledge of workers in Vietnam. But they're not really considered as training for Vietnamese workers to go back into the Vietnamese system. And they generally don't pull Vietnamese workers out of abattoirs that currently exist because there is a high English language proficiency requirement that limits the ability to take workers generally out and train them, although different models have different systems. And I guess the second type of training that exists at the moment is the ability to offer workers through government support, NGOs, international aid, industry support. I personally was involved with a lot of trainings with Meat and Livestock Australia when I was working for them, supporting the industry with training of animal handling, meat processing, other aspects to improve either individual businesses or the industry. But these are often either in partnership with business or helping the government, running workshops at a government level. And from an Australian perspective, most of the training programs are for Australian imported cattle, specifically to improve the processing and handling of those animals, because there is regulation around how those animals are handled for animal welfare reasons. So many of the support programs are for trade and investment purposes, specific for those facilities that are handling Australian animals.
So, what are the training programs that are designed for Vietnamese workers to work inside Vietnam?
I guess I've got a current sponsorship to do some training with slaughter and environment and meat quality that's funded by the Australian government through the Australian Vietnam Economic Grant. And we'll do some training at the end of March in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. And it's open to everybody in the industry, and anybody that's really interested in turning up is more than welcome to turn up, and we'll run through abattoir processing, specifically cattle abattoir processing. Again, it's open for everybody.
But how do industry people get access to these training programs?
I can't provide much more support than that, unfortunately. In terms of the other general training programs or other general NGO work, it's just a matter of being aware of that happening. The abattoirs are generally contacted, at least within the cattle sector that I'm mainly working in. Normally, we try to contact them as much as possible directly, or through our relationship with governments. I know other programs that are running in this space work hard to try to work through governments and others to get the notice out there that training programs are running. The training program becomes quite difficult to advertise to public, just mainly because there's no formal structure, no vocational training structure to advertise this to either people wanting to get involved or the general public. So they tend to be reasonably closed door training sessions. There's kind of, it's really just a matter of being a part of the industry to know these things are going on. Obviously, for company training, the training is initiated and conducted by the companies themselves. So you would have to be employed by the specific companies to be able to receive that specific training that was done, e.g. through Masan or Sanha, etc.
What kind of training do those courses provide, and how would it improve the performance of the slaughterhouses?
I guess for the abattoir, it would improve all of the above. It would mean that the meat's handled more hygienically and therefore has a longer shelf life. In some programs that are supporting businesses to process into chilled beef programs, they need to teach how to correctly store and look after that meat and how to perform different cuts that are standard processing globally, but not necessarily standard processing for Vietnamese wet market processing. So it's exploring different cut types as well. So there's a lot of different ways to look at different processing of meat and the cuts that are going in. In terms of the industry-led programs that are more animal welfare-led, then handling animals correctly and killing them properly decreases bruising of meat, decreases dark cutting in pig, reduces impacts of PSE, and if we stun the pigs correctly, then it can reduce the crackbacks and issues with bruising of meat and blown out muscles from electrical stunning of pigs. So there are definitely some things that can be done from animal handling and making sure that the animals are healthy. And obviously from a marketing perspective results in higher quality meat products, that if you have got a higher quality market that you're selling that meat into, you can definitely attract greater volume.
What about the role of equipment and equipment suppliers in improving the performance of the workers and of the meat plants in general?
Look, automation is definitely possible in meat processing. There's a lot of investment going into it at the moment. As I mentioned, the labour shortage is an issue globally. So a lot of developing countries, or all developing countries, are investing in different ways to automate processing, and different plants have different capabilities to process higher volumes. For large volume abattoirs, especially those that are processing into higher value markets, but especially, as long as they've got high volume, then automation can definitely help. But simple automation, even just like use of mechanical tools, is a really good first step. But full automation is definitely where it's going to. In reality, the big abattoirs already have contacts with a lot of those equipment suppliers, and the number of equipment suppliers that have got any level of automation are well known and quite small. So I already know that the large companies in Vietnam are already talking to a lot of these equipment suppliers to be able to work out how to automate their plant. But automation costs a lot of money. So again, in our smaller abattoirs, even mid-sized abattoirs, automation just isn't really a reality because the investment in infrastructure is going to be too high for the return on that investment. And coming back to, I guess, my initial point around the future of abattoirs in Vietnam, if we can't get access to export markets, or with the increased competition from imported products, there's very little incentive for most abattoirs to be investing further in their own development. So I think automation is definitely available, but cost limitations for generally most abattoirs is definitely real.
Well, from what you've shared, I guess the role of equipment suppliers is really important here. But some suppliers are already engaging in, like Marel. They share with me that they are offering training program for meat processors once the facilities start operating, and as per requirement from the customers too. But it's true what you said, that the industry needs to raise the awareness further to really make a difference in the performance of the slaughterhouses. So, anything else you would like to share to our audience before we end the podcast?
Look, if the current competitive environment was to be maintained as it is, there's no reason for any businesses to really change, especially the small and family operators. Investing in hygiene, safety, ability to sell chilled or frozen products into the market, or killing the best animals for eating quality, all cost money. So any normal abattoir won't get paid more for the products coming out of them because of the way that the sales and distribution channels are. It's very difficult for them to trace that product and therefore derive increased value from it through the supply chain. And therefore, because those sales channels don't exist, it's actually quite challenging for them to do that. If they want to access those markets, of course they can improve. There's a lot of access to that knowledge globally.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your very interesting insights, Michael. See you again soon.
Pleasure to talk to you, and more than happy to talk at any stage. If anyone wants to contact me, they can find me on LinkedIn under Michael Patching, or email me at michael@altafoodagri, ALTAFOODAGRI.com. We can talk about either training programs, future training programs, or support in your abattoirs.
We hope you found this episode insightful for your meat processing business. Thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Music, or your preferred podcast platform. For more on the Asian animal protein industry, visit www.asian-agribiz.com.